All right, welcome to Relationship Reset. This month, I'm so excited to have a good friend of mine here with me, and Mark Fincher. He is the chief mentor at Living Tree Connections, and he is a loving husband and a father of five. He's a homeschool dad too, which is awesome. He takes relationships seriously, and after years of trial and error, um, and then there's a period there, so I said that sentence wrong. He loves to look at how relationships with ancestors help or hinder developing relationship with those around him. And he wants to help others feel comfortable in their own skin, and starts with knowing who you are and why they matter. And I just want to say a little bit about Mark. He and I worked together a little bit, and he is a really, really amazing guy. I have been impressed with his level of dedication to growth and him, growing himself, and then also his dedication to really helping others. He has a heart of gold. Seriously, this guy does. And so I'm honored to have him here with us. And I know he has some really powerful things to share with us, because him and I have talked on this subject before, and it's fun. He has some amazing insights. So I'm excited to share him with you today. And all right, Mark, you're up. Let's hear it.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. I really appreciate that. For myself, to have somebody say I have a heart of gold. In the past, I would have said, yes, it's really cold and it's hard, but it's not anymore. And that's because I've worked through developing relationships. And because of that, I really want to share what I've learned. And part of what I've learned is what I want to talk about tonight. So first of all, I really want to thank Julie for inviting me to participate in the webinar tonight. So, let's give her a big round of applause, right? And wave your hands for her. And also, I appreciate those of you who've joined us tonight, because one, you're taking time out of your day. You have family, you have things to get done. I really appreciate you being here, because it shows that you really are looking to improve yourself and help your relationships with others. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Okay. Do you know your parents? Okay. Do you know your parents? And how's your relationship with them? And then how's your relationship with your second grade uncle? How about your relationship with your third cousin 8 times removed? See, we don't often think about relationships going back in time. Now, parents, yeah, of course. Yeah, I got a relationship with my parents. But what if your parents, one of your parents or both of your parents have passed away? Or your grandparents, or whoever it is, if there's somebody that you have a relationship with and they're now no longer with you to continue that relationship in the here and now, does that end the relationship? And I would posit that no, it doesn't. So let me explain to you where I'm coming from. For myself, I've had several instances where I dealt with family issues that actually caused problems for me. Now, when I say cause problems, what I'm talking about is that there were emotional triggers tied to my relationship with those family members. Okay. Now, we all understand emotional triggers with a spouse or a child or a parent. We know what that's like. We know that, they can trigger us very easily. But when we start talking about our ancestors, what are those triggers? What does that look like? So an example that I have is I have Uncle Ed. His name was Ewald Otto von Geer. And I probably saw him a time or two when I was a wee little lad. I remember one time my mom took my brother and myself to his home, but she parked across the street, and he lived in a mansion. She parked across the street and said, "You two stay in here." And we're like, "Why do we have to stay in the car?" We were small. I was probably about 4, maybe 5. And I'm thinking to myself, why do I have to stay here? I want to go in that nice big house you're going into. But she was afraid to take us in because he had so many nice things in his home. She was afraid we'd break something. So I don't remember Uncle Ed, but he means a lot to me. And I never could really figure out what the relationship was. He was just Uncle Ed. And it finally became apparent to me who he was as I started looking into my family history. And it was actually at my grandfather's, well, as we were visiting after my grandfather's funeral. I was visiting with some of my cousins who were my mom's age. And in visiting with them, we were like, well, what's the relationship between this family member and this family member? And we brought up Uncle Ed, and I was like, well, what's the relationship there? And as we looked at that, we realized that he and my grandfather were actually nephew and uncle. So Uncle Ed is my second great uncle. And I've always been enamored with my Uncle Ed because he was a guy who actually kind of ran away from home at 16. And as he ran away from home, he ended up in America. And I had the story all mixed up. But he ended up in China. And I have a degree in Asian studies, and so I'm all about the Orient. And so, man, I was all about Uncle Ed. He was just a fascination to me. Well, similarly, I have other family members that Uncle Ed triggers me a little bit on the, I got the story all wrong, but I figured it out. But I have other family members where they trigger me in different ways. So, for example, my fourth great grandmother was an interesting woman, Rhoda Ann Harden, and she married my fourth great grandfather, William Patterson Shaw. He was a Southerner through and through, as was she, but she had the attitude of aristocracy. And I remember hearing a story about when her oldest son, my grandfather, or my second great grandfather, was living with them. He was the first one to get married. He was living with them with his wife, and his wife, Nancy Jane Weatherby. Now, the Weatherbys were Southern elites, okay? And Nancy Jane was pregnant and about a week away from delivering, and Rhoda, over the dinner table, made some comment to her that infuriated her so much. She got up from the table, grabbed her stuff, packed it on the horse, and her husband came out of the house as she left, and he's like, what are you doing? She says, if you're interested in finding your wife, I'll be at my mother's. Okay? What kind of emotion does that bring up for you? What kind of thoughts come to mind? Now, who's triggering whom? Is it the mother-in-law that's triggering? Is it the daughter-in-law that's triggering? And I had all these mixed emotions, and I thought to myself, should I dislike one of them? Obviously, there was some major strife for a woman who was a week away from delivering her first child to up and leave on horseback. Well, it comes down to, how am I dealing with that relationship? Am I going to condemn one of them, both of them? Am I going to accept them? Am I going to love them? What am I going to do? What am I going to choose in this relationship to accept from myself? And what kind of expectations am I putting upon them? So let me give you a little bit of background on these two women. This happened in about 1874. So it's after the Civil War. And Nancy Jane's father had actually been captured during the Civil War, and he died in a POW camp. So she grew up, and this was when she was 3 years old, so she grew up without a father. So her mother was a single mom trying to get by. Now, I imagine her mom was tough as nails because she raised her children to adulthood. She made it happen. pretty astounding thing back in that day to just on your own do that. And I've got a lot of ancestors like that, that as I've learned about them, wow, they are hard workers. They are people who make things happen. And Rhoda Ann was kind of on the opposite end. She was used to comfort. She was used to the nice things in life, and she expected people to treat her as a fine, cultured woman. So no matter how we look at it, there were different come-froms from both women. And whatever was said is really irrelevant. One reacted in a certain way, and the other one was unwilling to change her perspective. I don't think either one of them was right. And did it really matter? No, because my great-great-grandfather was still born. He still grew up. He still married. And the family line continued. But it triggered me when I heard the story. And think about all the things going back through your ancestral lines that can trigger you. And why do they trigger you? It's because as you look at that, those triggers have been passed down from generation to generation. Now, not every trigger is. People make choices and they choose to react differently based on what their choices are, but they still have the inheritance of what they've seen at home. Whether it's coming from parents or grandparents, maybe it's something that their siblings picked up from an uncle or an auntie. You don't know. But as you learn about these people, as you really learn about them, you get an opportunity to know them. So a name and a date isn't sufficient to tell you who they were. You need to start looking at their story. And their story may only be findable by just looking at history itself. What was going on in the region? I know what was going on in the South during the Civil War. Things weren't pretty. So when we consider what's going on, why would my Uncle Ed have left? Why did he leave Germany? What was it that drove him to do that? Was it something at home? Was it something political? There are all kinds of different things that can cause that. So I want you to think about in your own life, what are those things that might be hampering you in your relationships with people around you because those triggers are there. Something that you might have inherited that you don't even recognize as an inheritance, but certainly a trigger that you recognize when it comes up. Whether it's anger, whether it's depression, whether it's just not wanting to deal with anything. We often think, oh, I've got it all under control. But we know we really don't. Deep down, we know there are things that bother us. And maybe sometimes it would behoove us to look a little bit further into our family to say, where did that come from? And how do I resolve that issue with my family? And for myself, it's been a fascinating journey because as I resolve those issues, I start finding that when that happens with somebody that I meet, it doesn't trigger me again. So I've found that resolving my relationships with my ancestors is actually helping me become a better person today. Because people like me more because I've actually done some digging to figure out who I am. Now, I'm not going to lay blame on my ancestors. It's just something that's there. It's something that I need to recognize that there's some kind of a story, some kind of programming, whatever you want to call it, that is affecting how I act today. Now, I can work on those kind of relationships with people that I'm dealing with today. But one thing I found fascinating about dealing with my ancestors in this way is they're pretty quick to forgive. And if I can get forgiveness from them and trying to work through an issue, I suddenly am able to quickly forgive others because I've learned that from them. And I love learning about them because I keep finding new things that I can work on. And in doing that, I feel empowered because that knowledge actually allows me to proactively make changes. As I find those things, I can go, oh, that's something I probably should work on. And as I do that, I start moving forward faster, and I don't have to go through the pain of having that same problem over and over again with other people as I try to work through them with people who react to me. It makes it a little bit easier. Now, I'm not going to say everybody should take this approach, because for some people, that's just too weird. And I get that. But I'm positing to you that perhaps if you take a look at that, maybe this is a technique that can help you with people around you, people that you care about. Maybe it would help you with your spouse or your kids. Maybe it would help you with your boss. But whoever it might help you with, isn't it worth a little effort? And the real plus to me is, in doing that, I get to know my family. And I really learn to love them. And to me, that's a big deal. Because I'm a spiritual man, and I know one day I'm going to get to meet them. And I want to be able to go up to them and hug them and say, I love you. I know who you are, and I love you. And that, to me, is worth it all. So what I'd like to offer to you is that I'm actually working on a CD about seeing, and I'm going to record a little bit of that story for you, and I'm going to offer that to you for free on my website. So I'm going to record that and put it out there for anybody who would like to have that. So all I want you to do is just go to my website, which is livingtreeconnections.com. Go out there and just say, I want to see. And I'll give you a code to download that audio so that you can get a little bit more understanding of how to see. Now, the other thing that I want for you is to learn a little bit more about this process for me in gaining the opportunity to really get my mind expanded by this whole thing. And this actually comes from my experience with my father's father. My grandfather Doyle, we never knew. My dad never knew him. And one day he did. One day he actually found out who he was, where he was living, and got to meet him. That was an interesting experience for my whole family. And in part of that experience, I had to learn how to deal with who Doyle was and what he had done. And I've actually made a recording explaining my story and how I worked through that to come up with these ideas of how to deal with ancestral triggers. So, as most of you know, CDs generally go for anywhere from $29 to about $17. And normally, my CD goes for $17. But because you're here tonight, I'm going to offer my CD, Stories of My Grandfather, How an Imperfect Man Helped Me to Become Better. And I'm offering that to you for $15 with the code GRANPA. GRANPA. So if you want to get a copy of this CD for $15, I'll have that code up shortly on my website, and you can just order that, put that code in, and you'll be able to get the CD for $15. Now, why do I offer it that way? Because I want people to learn what it is that really, really helped me. And I want you to have the same experience of being able to find love and joy in your relationship with your family. It really is important. And that's my message to you. And I hope your takeaway is you can start finding out who they are and learning to love them, warts and all. So thanks for listening, and I hope that that helped you a little bit to gain some insight into who you are and how you can relate better with others. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. That's awesome. I have his CD, and I was one of the first ones to buy it, right?
Yes, you were.
And it's awesome. I loved it. I loved his stories and what he learned from it and stuff. So I would highly recommend it.
Thank you.
um, I'd like to share a little experience of my own. Is that okay?
Sure.
So I a few years ago, I was really close to my grandparents, and a few years ago, my grandma passed away. We knew that, I mean, she was like 94, so we knew she wasn't, going to last that much longer, but it was kind of unexpected. She was still doing pretty good, and she passed away in her sleep in the night, and so I felt like I didn't have the chance to say the things I really wanted to say to her. And when she died, it was really, really, really hard on me. Like, I went and, I was pretty depressed about it. And the thing that I felt like helped me the most was to write those feelings down. It was several years ago, so it was before I ever learned anything about that kind of thing. And so, now I know that I have the power of writing things down or talking things out instead of just holding it in, right? But back then I didn't, and so I just naturally decided that I needed to do that. And so I wrote her letters, several, so that I could fully express to her the things that I really wanted to say to her. And it helped me mend that relationship. It wasn't that our relationship was bad, but I felt bad that I didn't share those things with her. The way that, what she meant to me and the things that I was thankful for having, that how she impacted my life. And I mostly on this program talk about relationships with your, family or, people that are right there in your life right now. And very rarely do we ever mention people who have passed on, or even people who aren't close to you that are in your family, or, like you talked about.
Yeah.
And so I think it's kind of fun, but I think the same principles apply to anyone, any relationship, right?
Yeah. And I think the key thing is recognizing that there is a relationship. And, too often I think we look at anybody who's passed on and we're just like, well, that's done. But it's not. It goes on. And when you have that feeling to say, okay, yeah, there's a relationship there, and we recognize it and we put it into our heart, to talk to them really is real. They're listening. They want to hear from us. And they want the best for us, which is why they're so willing to forgive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So so one of the things that I've found with relationships, with no matter who that is, if they're in your life still or not, meaning they could be still living but far away, not in your life, or even, passed on, or they could be in your life still. I've used these kinds of techniques on all of those different situations. And that technique is, one of those techniques is writing them a letter and really expressing yourself in that letter on what you feel like you wanted to say to that person. And I feel like it does not just, it helps mend myself. I don't know if it does anything for that person, but it helps mend me, or it helps me see how I really feel. Because sometimes we have our feelings and they're going around inside of us, and we kind of catch a glimpse of, I feel this way a little bit. But until we actually take them out and put them where we can see them, we don't really realize how we feel.
Right.
And then how are we supposed to manage that if we don't even realize it, if we're not even aware of it? Like, maybe you're upset at somebody and you don't really even realize that until you've written it down and allowed that to come out of you. And then now you've seen that and you can change that feeling. You can be more deliberate about choosing how you feel about that person. Just like you were talking about, you have the choice of how you're going to feel about the people that you have in your family line and their stories, the things that trigger you.
Yeah. And I think one of the key things that I found is anytime a news story comes up, whether it's good or bad, I I try not to go to judgment, because my first thought now is, what was going on in their life? What would have led them to that kind of a decision? And it's fascinating to me as I really find, and the closer the individual is to us in time, most of the time it's easier to find some information about their actual family circumstances. But regardless, I've actually gone back on my family side in Germany, where I couldn't quite figure out why there were so many deaths happening in a short period of time. And they were all from, what was listed as a fever, malignant fever. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. Well, I finally found in history that this was a period of time when Napoleon's army was actually going through the area. And the soldiers had brought in typhoid fever. Well, how do you think that was going to affect everybody? Everyone was scared. Everyone is getting sick. And so, yeah, would that cause family strife and strife among neighbors? Yeah, it's going to really put a whole community into turmoil. And when you start recognizing all of those things, it really changes your outlook on how people live their lives. Because we want the same for ourselves. We want people who look at us, 50 years from now to go, well, I get why grandpa did that. Or, well, maybe great grandma didn't make the best choice there, but I could kind of see what led up to that. And if we give the person the benefit of the doubt and actually have some compassion for them, it really changes how we feel about them. And to me, that's been very, very healing for people that I didn't know until I really took some effort to know them. And I really feel like I know a lot of them now.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I would like to share a story about Mark and I talked about this a while back, but I would like to share a story about kind of a discovery of kind of what he's talking about. So I used to have this problem, well, I don't know, problem, I guess you'd say, where I would have certain triggers in my parenting, where when my kids would fight or some sort of problem, it would trigger me to feel like I needed to have sugar, like really bad. It could be any kind of sugar. It didn't matter. It could have been straight. Well, I never ate straight sugar, but usually it was some sort of sugar in something, and it would like be this uncontrollable desire that if there was some sort of strife or fighting or something, and then I felt like I needed to eat sugar. And so I really, really internally was trying to figure this out. And the interesting thing is, it came to my mind that maybe it was something passed down from my family, that it wasn't just my issue that I was dealing with, but that it was a feeling passed down from my line from my ancestors. And not that I'm blaming him, but that it was just something that, there's something triggered or something happened in the past to one of them, or maybe multiple, I don't know, but that kind of passed that down, because I noticed that my mom has the same problem. And then I thought about it, and my grandma, her mom, has the same problem. And so I was like, okay, I can see that it's not just me that has this problem. And so I kind of intuitively was like looking at the lines and where they came from, and started looking into the lives of the people that came, that the progenitors from my grandma, and came to this woman who was I don't know how far back, she was a grandmother pretty far back. And I read her story, or not read her story, there wasn't a story, but I saw that she had babies that had died when they were really little, and then two of her adult sons left her in England and came to America. And so she had been abandoned basically by her kids, and then two of them had died. And this feeling, as I read that story, the same feeling that I feel or felt when my kids would fight came over me. This feeling of inadequacy as a parent. And so I was like, I think I found where this came from. And so I just started writing her a letter, and I, said, I just, let her know, I feel this way, and I see that you have this happen to you, and I just kind of talked through it. And then I took it to the next level, and I went out in the car, and I was like, okay, come to the car with me. And so I invited her to sit next to me in the car, and I just talked with her. And the feelings that came up were so amazing. Like, I had not lost any children. I have not, and I don't know what that feels like. But those feelings of losing children came to me, and I had a deep, deep cry over losing children, and I've never lost any. How could I even know what that feels like? But I was feeling what her pain was, and that had been passed down through those lines to me. And so I let those emotions out, and I recognized where they came from, and I gave, that permission to heal and to let that go. And it was just an incredible experience where it's very tender, and so I'm, being vulnerable, sharing that with you guys. But I just felt inspired that I should. I didn't plan on sharing that story, but I felt like I should share that with you guys because it's kind of what he's talking about, where things those feelings that from what ancestors felt, or things and experiences in their life, those can be passed down and even cause health problems or whatever through your family. And when you can identify those and heal them and know where they came from and know about that person, and then you are able to start to fix those things in your family line, right? Is that a little too deep?
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Julie, because it is tender and it's very sweet. But the fact that you felt inspired to share that, I appreciate that, because some of those things should be kept close. But too often, we don't even want to think about that kind of a thing happening to us because it's too raw for us to even approach that. So, I mean, I look at you as a very brave woman to say, I'm going to go talk to her and find out what was really going on. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about how emotional I get over certain things with death. And I've really never had anybody particularly close outside of my grandparents pass away. And yet I am constantly triggered by that kind of feeling. And I think if we don't recognize it, if we just let it happen all the time, we tend to put ourselves down because we don't understand what's happening. And so we think that there's something wrong with us. And there's nothing wrong. It's just something that's there that you just need to recognize and work through. And I think that's one of the great takeaways that we can get in building relationships. Bad relationships are called bad, but what's your takeaway from what you learn from that? What do you learn from the mistakes so that you can do something right? What do you learn from the mistakes so that you know what to avoid? And if you really start looking at your relationships in that perspective, all of a sudden, those bad relationships become a real asset to you. And if you start looking at it really well, that relationship probably can mend and become very strong. So I think you're right on.
Yeah, I feel like I'm close to her now, and she was born long, long ago. I never knew her. I didn't even know any stories about her. I'd never heard of her before in our, the stories that have been passed down. But I feel close to her because of that experience that I felt like happened, I don't know if she's there or not, but I felt the feelings, and I can't deny that. I can't deny that the feelings that I felt, they were not mine.
Yeah.
That was a cool experience. Um, so I would like to invite the listeners, the people that are listening. I would like to invite you to think about the who came to your mind while we were sharing these things. What person in your ancestry, or is it someone you know? Maybe you need to go look at your line and say, who is it that's coming up in your life that you might need to write a letter to or have a conversation with and discover some things. The cool thing is when you do that, when you have those experiences, it is incredible how it helps you. When you learn where you came from and have those connections and build those connections, it strengthens you as a person. My kids we invite my parents over all the time to tell stories to my children. On a regular basis, they come over, and that's their purpose, is they come to tell stories of their ancestors or of their own life. And it totally boosts my kids' confidence in themselves. And I hear them say things like, we are very important and special people because our grandpa, he did this. And they feel so much pride and joy over what their grandparent, who they came from, the people they came from. And so when we discover for ourselves, even though we're adults, it still does the same things for us. And when we have that connection, we know we have all these people behind us that came before us, and they were neat and amazing people too. And that boosts your confidence and everything, and you can go and spread that and help more people. And so it just kind of has this huge ripple effect as you discover those things, right? That's your motivation, right, Mark? That's why you are teaching these things.
Absolutely. I look at it now, the more I learn about my ancestors, the more I say, maybe I see a neighbor or somebody else who's doing something fantastic, and I go, I don't know if I could do that. But when I look at my ancestors and I go, they did what? They lived through what? Well, if they can do it, I'm part of their family. I know I can do it. I gain that confidence because I see what they've accomplished. Now, there may be the opposite where, things didn't go well. That's then my choice. Do I follow that pattern or do I change it? And I choose to change those patterns. I want to be the change agent in my family. But it's always your choice. You can choose to accept the good and change the things that aren't so good, or you can just keep doing what you've always been doing in your family line.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, awesome. This has been so fun, just, chatting about this. This is awesome. Okay, is it okay if we open up for questions from people?
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. If you have a question for either Mark or I, or just want to discuss something, that would be awesome too. So just unmute yourself, and you can keep your picture blank or you can put it on video. Either way is fine with us. But we want to open up questions for you. You can hop into the conversation.
I really appreciate what Mark's been talking about, because I'm teaching family history on a service mission, and I've had the opportunity of watching these people who have no hope in life, and they start to get to know their ancestors, and they start to get a grip on.
Does it do what we were talking about, like boost their confidence in themselves?
I think so. I've seen one life change dramatically, and I've seen other lives, they just kind of timidly are working on it and for them, so they're seeing new things and experiencing new things by realizing that their ancestors are actually affecting them, that their stories mean something to them. So I've been really inspired tonight to share more personal stories in my lessons with them, because and to share with them some of the healing experiences that I've had in getting to know my ancestors. It's a good experience.
Awesome. Yeah, that will be powerful, because they'll see that if you can have those experiences, then they can have those experiences, and I think that will be powerful for them.
Yeah, I've been trying to teach one of them to write letters, and I realized, oh, that's what I need to do. I need to tell them the story of something like Mark's experience, where your experience, where you wrote those letters, not because any abuse or any serious thing had happened between you and that person, but because you wanted to come to an understanding of her experiences and how that had set a pattern in the family. And that's amazing. I had never really thought of it in that context before. I love the approach.
And all because I was addicted to sugar is what I thought, but I wasn't really addicted to it, you know?
Right. Yeah.
It was that feeling, and I was trying to feel that hole that I felt.
I love Mark's story too about the South, because I've lived in the South, and I have ancestors who came from the South, and he's made a very good point about we don't really talk about post-traumatic syndrome in ancestors who went through the Civil War, and yet it was very much there. And it wasn't just for the people who fought in the war, it was also for the widows and the orphans and the people who lost everything because they no longer had a plantation, no longer had slaves. It was devastating. I have an ancestor who lost a slave because he gambled. He'd gotten a slave as his inheritance from his grandfather, and he was drawn into this interesting situation where several people had pooled their resources with their slaves to work on this one plantation, and apparently he got involved in gambling and lost ownership of his slave, and so his family was forced off of the plantation and his slave stayed on the plantation. It's an amazing story, and yeah, it's quite a journey. I'd never thought about writing a letter to that person, but I think I need to. I think I need to write some letters to some family members.
Awesome. Let us know what you experienced. That would be fun. I mean, if you feel so inclined, because it is a very personal experience.
It is.
But yeah.
It is.
Just let us know. I did it, and it was an amazing experience.
And I congratulate you, Lynette, on actually recognizing that there's more you can do in that relationship. The thing that, and you mentioned slavery, Rhoda Ann and William Patterson were slave owners. When I found out about that one, oh, did that trigger me? You betcha. But one of the stories that really helped me to appreciate them a little bit more was that one of the slaves stayed with them after the war.
Uh-huh.
And she was considered part of the family. And she did cooking for them, and that's how she kept herself in the family. But they didn't want her to leave, and she didn't want to leave.
Right. Yeah.
There was a close bond with them. And, I've seen her name on census records. She was there. And they were affectionate towards her, and she was affectionate towards them. It wasn't always a bad relationship.
No.
So, yeah, there's a lot that you have to work through to look at it. But it is healing if you work through it.
Yeah. I'm excited. I am very impressed with what you've both shared with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for being on. We really appreciate that.
No problem.
Great. Awesome. Is there anybody else that wants to ask any questions or share anything, any insights that you had come to your mind?
Mark, if I could take a moment.
Sure.
I was thinking as you were talking about not going to a place of judgment first as you're finding out about the stories of your ancestors. And I have worked on really trying to be generous in my thinking and my thoughts toward other people. And I was curious as to how you've taken your experiences with learning about your ancestors and how that's carried over in your current relationships with people you're around all the time, or infrequently even. But
Yeah. And what I've really found with that, Matt, is that as I've become conscious of trying to not be judgmental, and as I've done that with my ancestors, now I'm not going to say I'm perfect with people, but it certainly has made it easier to go to non-judgment. So as I'm consciously thinking, well, I shouldn't be judgmental. If I do this with my ancestors, why am I not doing this with this person when I go to judgment? I catch myself and I say, no, I know better than that. And it actually allows me to quickly heal what I've done to that person. They may not even know what I've done, but it allows me to quickly heal and say, no, I need to look at a different perspective of this person. What's going on in their life? What's happening? So that they're doing whatever they're doing. And I quickly can see, oh, there's something there. I need to show some compassion. I need to have some acceptance of where they're at, honor who they are. And then it comes back to me and it's like, yeah, because they might think the same of me. And I certainly want that from them. And it changes that dynamic of, I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. I want them to feel accepted by me. And it really has helped me. Now, as I said, I'm not perfect. I have, this has been a process for me of about 35 years of working through ancestral issues. But my relationships with people around me were far worse than my relationships with my ancestors. And as I've worked through those, I've learned the techniques that help me to deal with people around me. And I'm to the point now where I actually want to meet people instead of hide from people. And that's been huge for me because I didn't like myself and I didn't like anybody else because I didn't like myself. But once I learned to love my ancestors, I started working on me going, well, shouldn't I love myself too? And that certainly has made a huge difference in how I relate to other people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's really cool. Yeah. It naturally just happens when you start looking at your ancestors and seeing how awesome they are and how much you love them, right?
And how we speak about them really is important. I've heard too many people say, oh, this stinker, or this one was so horrible. And they're part of the family.
Well, you came from them, so
Yeah.
yeah. Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. Was there anything else that you wanted to say?
I really like the idea of the inheritance that we get, and I really appreciate you both speaking to that. I feel like that I have a lot of good things I've inherited, and as I look at some of the things that aren't so great that I've inherited, it gives me a different perspective to see that, well, maybe something about me isn't just something that I chose necessarily. It's something I inherited, but it can stop with me, and that I can be the one that breaks the chain, and that's a good thing. And that, my ancestors and whoever it was that originated that can be cheering to end it. I'm sure they don't feel like they want it to continue on and cursing the rest of their posterity. And so that's a great thought for me, that inheritance that I get and what I do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. We can magnify the awesome stuff that was passed down and really honor them, and then we can help heal the things that were passed down that they didn't mean to pass down to us, right?
Yeah.
And in many
Thanks
ways,
again.
I think in many ways, Matt, people are cheering us, going, yeah, do it. Let's stop this. Because they, like you said, they don't want that continuing on. They want to see us be successful. They wanted to be successful. They probably had no idea what was happening to them. And so if we can break that chain, I think we have such a cheerleading section, we would not be able to comprehend it. And if we look at it that way, I hope it builds you up and gives you a little bit more strength and conviction that you can face whatever challenges you have in life, because you have a lot of people behind you to help you change things so that things get better for the next generation and the next generation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. All right, awesome. Well, is there anyone else? You can just unmute yourself, and we'd love to chat. All right. Well, I think we are. I think we're good. I think we're done, and so I just want to wrap up by just sharing one more time and inviting you one more time to really consider your relationships and the relationships that you have with those people. Adam and Lacey Platt said I would, but my kids are running around. That's okay. We all know how that goes. You're consider which relationship, as we discuss this, that you feel like this is the relationship I want to investigate. I want to learn more about this person or this issue and find out where it came from, and really just go seek understanding, and I bet you'll be guided to find the answers and the healing and all of that. I bet you'll be guided. And I know I was when I've been doing those things. I've been guided, and I hope that you if you're not already following Mark and following what he's doing, and also his CD, I hope that you do, because he's awesome. He's teaching these amazing things, and it's good to not only learn from him but share his message, like help him share his message. So, all right, thank you guys for being on today. I really thoroughly enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. So thank you so much, Mark, and you're doing awesome things. See, I told you guys, you have the heart of gold, right? You're just so awesome. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you tonight. I really appreciate that invitation to share this, because it's an important message for me to be able to share. So I thank you, and again, everyone who's been on tonight, thank you for being here.
Awesome.
Mark, could you really quickly tell us the webpage again?
Yes, it is livingtreeconnections, all one word, .com.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Have a great night, everyone. You guys are awesome and amazing. Bye. Bye, Mark.
Thanks.
Yeah.